So we will go ahead. All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to the May version of the Texas Leadership Network's Mastermind. We are here. You'll be missing a familiar face. Trisha, she's off making a difference in the world for some other clients today. So I will be leading you through doing the introduction, and we've got a great speaker today. But first, before we get started, I just want to remind everybody, it looks like we've got repeat joiners, so we won't go necessarily around the room and do one-for-one introductions. But I do want to remind everybody, so the purpose of a mastermind is really, we want this to be as interactive as possible. So the format really is, we're going to talk about a topic today, but this is really informal, and those who have been here before kind of know we can interject, we can talk. It's here to generate discussion. And the real power of a mastermind is the collective brain power, experiences, knowledge, wisdom, insights, and questions that we can muster. Every one of us have different perspectives. We have different experiences. And so the power of the group, the input of the group, the solutioning of the group is far more powerful than we can ever accomplish on our own. So suffice to say, let's make this interactive. And if you have a question, just chime in. This month, we have Bill Bolton, is one of our colleagues who is going to walk us through a really cool topic and a relevant conversation and a relevant topic, no matter where you are in your business life cycle, or no matter where you are in life, and that's the leadership component of communicating for success. So without further delay, let me turn it over to Bill, who will facilitate our mastermind today. Bill, it's all yours.
All right. Thank you, Dennis. I encourage people to jump in and participate. There's a number of pictures on the screen, so if I miss a hand in the air or miss the little hand up on the screen, by all means, just interject, start talking, and contribute to the conversation. But I do want to welcome all of you to the May 2022 Texas Leadership Network Mastermind Group, and I'm honored to have joined the call today, and I appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us for this discussion. Everybody has so many different experiences, both professionally and personally, that really can contribute a lot to everybody's learning in an event like this. So after an hour together, I hope we all have a new perspective, that you have a different perspective may help you in your many different leadership challenges and roles that you play every day, both in your career and your broader life. First, I want to ask, does everybody have a piece of paper and a pen? If not, I'd ask you to take a moment and grab a piece of paper and a pen. Half a sheet of paper is probably good enough, but to have that handy, because we'll be using that in a few minutes. So today we're going to talk about communication and how that affects leadership. We're going to talk about DISC, and that's a universal language. I'm curious, has anybody had a personal DISC assessment done or familiar with that term, DISC? So I see many coaches are nodding their heads, a few others, Greg, Kristen. Okay, great. So you've got more perspective than some. It looks like most others have not had a DISC assessment, which is good. We'll go through and just do a very brief kind of back of the envelope DISC style identification. So then everybody will have some perspective on their own personal perspective. So first, let's start off with, as Lee Iacocca said in his book, Iacocca, a couple of decades ago, communication is everything. Now, how many people have heard or have some familiarity with who Lee Iacocca is? I might be dating myself with this. He went to my alma mater, Lehigh, so I'm very familiar with him. He's famous for turning around Chrysler in the early 80s, and he resurfaced again in the recent movie Ford versus Ferrari. He was one of those Ford company characters in the movie. It all starts here. Communication impacts everything. So we're going to take a look at the universal language of communication and behavior style and a way to describe tendencies called DISC. We also discuss how it can help us improve our communication and connect with others. So good communication is about connecting. It's building trust, listening, being heard to get results. So show of hands, who would like to get better results? Okay, quite a few people. Key is who believes you can get better results with better communication? Absolutely, me too. Now, people do things for their reasons, not mine. That's something I try to keep in mind. And their agenda is often different than mine. We all play many different roles in our job and life. In each role, you deal with all kinds of people who have different agendas, and it's not yours. This is something good to think about. And it's also helpful to be prepared for how you'll handle that. You can be manipulative or a gracious host. Which do you want to be? Which should you be? This communication tool will help you be the gracious host. Connect and build trust faster. When you connect and build trust, you get results more effectively. So today I'm talking about behavior and communication tendencies. So this describes the four main styles. It's important that first we understand what it is. So DISC provides you some tools to help you identify some behaviors of those around you and those that you're interacting with. It's to help you have a better understanding of how to communicate with them, and how to speak in their language, how to communicate in the way that they prefer to be spoken to and interacted with. There's no right or wrong answers, and studies have proven it's accurate across many countries and societies. It's not a label. It's really just silently recognizing style nuances to be able to interact with that person better. So I want to open it up more here. So have you ever had a conversation with someone you connected with immediately? You just, right out of the chute, you started talking to somebody. It feels good when you connect quickly like that, right? So I'd like a few of you to share some of your experiences. Think about a conversation that you really connected with someone. Why do you think that happened? Or what did that enable about that conversation you were having with that person? How did you feel about a next conversation with that person? So who's had a conversation where right off the bat, you just found you connected that person, you had an easygoing conversation, you could move on to a bunch of topics, be on the same page. Anybody had that kind of experience? Who would like to share a little bit about that? Mark, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
So yeah, Bill, first off, thanks for doing this topic. I find this fascinating stuff, and I can personally relate to, I have had, whenever I really hit it off with an individual in a quick, early way, it's usually because they are naturally trusting and they are willing to be vulnerable, because that's kind of how I operate. And so I connect with that. On the other hand, when they are not that way, it's more challenging for me.
Mm-hmm. So similar style, similar interaction and communication preference, you noticed you hit it off with them pretty quickly.
For sure.
Anybody else care to share some experience like that? Kristen, please.
Yeah, so I was taking a training from a gal that I only knew online because I was doing her website. And so we roomed together to save money for both of us, both females, so it was comfortable. And we ended up finding out that we're so much more alike just because we're like, oh, hey, I do this when I sleep, or I do this, when I get up in the morning, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I do that. And so it was just hilarious that we had those commonalities. So for me, when you find something that ties you into that other person, it just makes it so much more comfortable to do anything, knowing that you don't have to tiptoe around them. So.
Mm-hmm. Yes, a common experience, kind of a way of looking at things, all factors that can build comfort quickly, and identifying and probably you're seeking to understand each other. And so understanding each other, you're adapting to each other's way of communicating and style.
Exactly.
How about a situation where someone was making a call, maybe a sales call, or having an employee conversation, and you found it just did not go smoothly at all? you just have a hard time communicating, and it might be someone you work with. You have a difficult time communicating with them. Every time you just seem to be on different page, different wavelength. What did that feel like? Or how does that affect you in communicating with that person?
I have a fun example where the two styles. So most people may not believe this, but I'm an introvert. I'm not typically outspoken. So when you go to like networking events and things like that, like I have to gamify going and meeting people. So if there's a room of 50 people, I'm okay with standing in the corner and talking to someone I know for the entire hour or 2 hours, and I'd be perfectly happy doing that. So in order to go and meet people, I got to say, all right, so there's 50 people. Let me go meet 5. I need to talk to 5 people that I wouldn't otherwise talk to. Right? And so I have to force myself to do it. Where there are extroverts who will meet everybody in the room and remember their name. So that's not me. So the story that I've got is I was doing role. It was actually part of certification, a certification class, and we were doing role playing. And one of those like really, really, highly extroverted people, I was role playing with them, and they were leaning in, and I physically, like, it made me really, really uncomfortable. So uncomfortable that I put my hands together and I created space. Like I was like literally pushing him away because it was just too darn close. And it wasn't because the conversation was uncomfortable, but his way of, he just wanted to talk, and he wanted to get close, and he wanted to lean in. And it threw the whole role play off. Like it just made that like the most uncomfortable role play I'd ever done. But it was interesting the way and it wasn't conscious, but unconsciously I created a physical barrier, which looked even more awkward than, the interaction.
And that's a great example. And everyone probably finds themselves in a similar situation where you're kind of reacting to the person. And so that's part of looking at DISC and understanding your actions. If you're the type of person who's leaning in heavily and wondering, why is that person not listening to me? There's a clue there. If they're putting up their fingers, trying to create distance, and also vice versa, maybe your personality is to be more reserved. And so the person across from you might be wondering, why aren't we communicating well? Because you're just a little bit different in approaching communication. So those are great examples. Anybody? Mark.
Hey, Bill, just to follow Dennis's thought process, I have a client that is very different than me, thank God, but he's very, very introverted, and doesn't, I guess what would be the right word, adapt very much to anyone. And so as we're in this relationship, it's become very apparent to me that I have to get comfortable with silence and time between thoughts and conversations. So I've had to deliberately slow down, let things sit, and wait for a response, because it inevitably comes, but he truly doesn't want to go at the pace I want to go. And that's uncomfortable, really uncomfortable, but I'm learning through this.
Yeah, very good. That's a wonderful example of how your leadership and your effectiveness in communication can be improved as you recognize those different styles and adapt your style to meet that person's expectations. Let's move forward. So why behavior styles? Partly it's to understand ourselves, what our strengths are and what that may indicate as strengths, but also to be aware of challenges of the person that leans into too heavily and how it affects others. Also, it's good to understand and recognize others' communication styles and preferences. And there's clues and there's ways that you can pick up on what their tendencies may be, and the goal being to adapt to connect with that person better and build trust with them better. So now we're going to complete a quick assessment But before we do that, I just want to point out with DISC, it's a neutral language. There's no right or wrong styles. And no style is better than another. All styles can be successful as leaders and teammates. There's strengths for every style and there's weaknesses for every style. And every style, if it's overextended, has limitations. And those behaviors can be frustrating to others. So just to reiterate also that a great team is comprised of all 4 styles. If any of the styles are missing, it can be more difficult to be a high-functioning team. So the goal is not really to associate with only people of a certain style. You're not going to have the best outcomes and the best results if you go that direction. So let's do a quick exercise. Everybody can pull out your piece of paper and your pen and very just roughly create this chart. So a big cross in the middle of the page. At the top, write task. And on the bottom, write people. On the left, reserved, and the right, outgoing. And then put in the letters C, D, S, and I. There's no grading for neatness. You're the only one that has to be able to read it. So now I'm going to ask you to kind of look at the vertical line in the middle. On the right side is outgoing. Other descriptors would include extrovert or involved, optimistic. And the left side of the vertical line is reserved or introvert or realistic or withdrawn. So now I want you to consider yourself when you're going about your work and going about your life, your professional life. If you consider yourself outgoing, put a big circle around the D and the I. If you're more reserved, please circle the C and the S. Okay. So everybody put a big circle on your page. Okay. Now I want you to look at the horizontal line. Consider how you prefer to get things done. Task is above the line versus people orientation is below the line. So task, think in terms of working with, like to work with plans and programs and projects, processes. For people orientation, one thinks more around caring and sharing and impact on relationships and emotion in your work. If your tendency is more people, please circle the S and the I below the line. If it's task, circle the C and the D above the line. Okay, so everybody have 2 circles down and therefore one of these letters as circled twice that's overlapping the 2 circles. So the letter where your circles overlap may be your primary style, your primary behavior and work style. So now it'd be good if we took a brief survey. And can I enlist Dennis? Can you help us do a brief survey? And what I'm asking everybody is just to share with everybody by virtue of voting, what is your dominant style or which letter do you have circled with 2 circles? Whoops. Did I mess up your survey, Dennis?
I think so.
Yeah, give me just 1 second. I'll relaunch it.
Okay.
Stop sharing.
Of course, all the D's got in right away, so.
Of course. But I didn't. I failed to mention. I failed to mention that the person who made me uncomfortable was Bill. It was our role play, and he was... All right, we're starting it again. Okay, now they're coming in. Couple more. All right, I think we got 1 person on the phone, so we got 11 to 12. I'm going to end it and share the results. You'll see the results, Bill?
Sure. Are you sharing them?
I see them.
Yeah, they're there.
Yep, they're up over the top. So we got, in case you can't see them, Bill, what we've got is, surprise, surprise, a bunch of high I's joining a mastermind in the middle of the day. So D's was 18%, I's 55%, S's 9%, and C's 18%.
Okay. And we're going to see some similarities to the broader population with those percentages here in a second. So now we'll briefly go through each of the 4 basic styles. So the percent is the share of the population that has that primary behavior style. Now remember, everyone's a combination and a blend of all of these styles. So this is just kind of indicating the predominant style or the more overriding style. Most intense behavior will be the one that's most easily observable and may override the others. So first one, the D's. Primary behavior style is dominance. General population 17%. We were 18%. Influencer, a little bit higher, as Dennis said. People in the middle of the day getting on a call and sharing experiences. Influencer is 38%. Broadly in the population, we were 55% today. The steady. Did I change the screen? Sorry about that. The primary behavior style, that's steadiness, or the S, is typically about 1/3 of the population. And we'll get into more details of what that type of personality is in a moment. And then the last one, compliance, is a lower percentage of the population, and we came in at 18%, and typically it's 13%. So very similar, given our sampling of our group, to what the broader population looks like. The other thing that you may notice that if you don't adjust your communication style to the person you're interacting with, you may be off target with about 75% of your interactions, depending on how strong that person's predominant communication preference is. So it's just an interesting observation of not adjusting can make more friction with about 75% of the population. So now I take a few minutes and go through and describe a little more detail each of these behavior styles. So first is the D, the dominance trait. With folks that this is their behavioral style, you'll notice an emphatic about everything that they do. Kind of very direct, bottom line, can be blunt, can be impatient, just some general characteristics. You can identify them. The couple different things that may stand out is fast-paced, as Dennis mentioned, leans toward you, maybe gets a little bit too close. Confident, takes chances. And some tidbits on interacting with them, things to do, be direct and brief, stick to business, some examples, and don'ts, be emotional or dominate the conversation. So I want to ask some opinions of others of how many a person with this type of predominant style, and perhaps this is you or perhaps it's not, how could this style be perceived negatively by others? What are the kind of things that could be picked up negatively by the other predominant styles if they're communicating as a dominant type of person?
Could be overbearing.
Controlling.
Yep, controlling and overbearing, absolutely. Can anybody think of someone that's like this in their work environment today?
Me.
Karen, and how does that come across to you?
If you're talking to me, that would be me. That's my personality right
Oh,
there.
that's you.
I'm really mild and mild mannered, but I am blunt. I am rough, and I get a lot of, because my voice is so deep. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I get that all the time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so if somebody that has this type of personality is delivering a communication or a message, how might that person's message be received by a non-D type of person? If that's the way they're delivering the message, how might those other personalities react, you think, or other people generally, if they're overly dominant in the way they're delivering communication?
Intimidated or offended? Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Excellent. They're intimidated, offended. Greg, I couldn't hear what you had said.
You don't want to listen to them. You just think they're crazy.
Yeah. Can be kind of a bit overwhelming for others communicating too strongly that way if they're not comfortable with that. Excellent. Let's go on to the next one. The next one is the I, the influencer type of style. You'll recognize these people. They bring, they get very excited about the situation, very emotional, a lot of energy, enthusiastic. They can be trusting and open-minded as well. Generally, the tendency to love being recognized and being the center of attention. Some other things you may pick up on in interacting with people that are influencer styles is that they might be disorganized, but they can be very expressive and smile a lot and very warm, welcoming. My friend Mark is very much that way.
Yeah, very unorganized.
No, the welcoming, the friendly part.
No, I'm the other thing too, for sure.
So,
And hey,
interacting
Bill,
with-
just on that topic, it's something I've had to manage because I've learned in time that when you're leading a team, if you have that style, there are other aspects that come out of it. And one of them for me, Bill, was that it'd almost be like I'm on the bus before anybody else is on the bus, but we don't know where we're going. There's no, you know what I mean? And that was the feeling for people who weren't just like me. So something I had to manage.
Yeah. The other thing is you may find that's helpful is if you are interacting with folks like that, be willing to chat. You got to be willing to warm them up a little bit to make that connection, that they're not ones that want to jump right down to business. You want to let them talk. Be a good listener. The things that you don't want to do, you don't want to react negatively. You don't want to be a wet blanket on their energy. Surefire way of kind of losing their attention and their interaction. So does anybody have some more stories to share with us about kind of your tactics of interacting with folks that you kind of view as being that influencer style, that higher energy, wanting to be the center of attention? You know, how do you communicate with them effectively in your personal experience?
I'll say something if you like. Hey,
Sure,
Bill.
Eddie.
Good to see you guys. I was just going to say about the touching stuff, which you mentioned, because I'm very high I. So for me, you know, I'm always very comfortable with giving people a hug. In fact, I'm kind of well known amongst my old friends for being the one who likes to give everyone a hug. But there are people who, you know, just don't like it. And so you've got to be careful with kind of immediately going in for the physical, giving everyone a hug or a slap on the back or whatever it was. It just can make people extremely uncomfortable. So if you're a high I, you've got to watch that. Because to me, it seems fine. But it doesn't fine to everyone.
So half the folks on the call were high I's. So
We can all have a massive hug together.
yeah, a massive hug. And what other situations as a high I do you find where you get a disconnect with others, partly based on that high I?
Are you asking me?
Anybody.
I mean, all I'd say is I think the high eyes, we go very quickly to things. So like, you know, we get an idea and we get very enthusiastic and we like go forward really fast. And very often that's uncomfortable for people who like think things through more. So we're a bit impulsive. You know, I'm perfectly capable of going out and doing an impulse buy. But later on, I think start thinking about it and realize it wasn't very wise. But you know, gotta watch that.
Karen, I think you were contributing.
Yes. Excuse me. One of mine is when I'm giving out orders. Well, I normally talk fast anyway. So when I'm giving out orders, it's like bam, 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 bam. And I notice people stop and look at me, and then I realize that I was going entirely too fast. So then I had to take a breath, step back, take a breath, and then repeat it, but repeat it in a slow enough motion or slow enough so everybody caught what I said the first time. Because I mean, I could go down the line and just say do, and the information in between was all missed. So slowing down to communicate, I know that's one of the things I work on all the time because I do speak a lot fast.
Yeah, and people have different ways of processing that information. Some are very quick to hop on the bus and go, and others are more processing and evaluating and trying to understand. Yeah,
Yes,
so you
that
absolutely pick up on that.
yes, that, and if I gave several instructions to one person, they've come back and said, which one did you want me to do first? And at that point, it wasn't about which one you need to do first. It's just about getting them all done. And I knew that person could get it done. So whatever you do, just do them. I don't care what order, just do them, you know. So it makes them understand that part of the process for me a little bit better.
Yeah, very good.
If I could pivot from the negative and share a positive though. So one of the interactions, one of the things about eyes, so you might be surprised to understand or know that, you know, Trisha has a very high eye. So I don't like social networking. I don't like, you know, those networking events, but because we kind of operate as a team, I don't have to. So, you know, that's what she enjoys and that's where she excels and that's her superpower. So it would be perfectly fine if I stood in the corner in that room of 50 people and only talked to one, because, well, she'll go meet all 50 of them. We can debrief later. But it is, you know, in my case, it does turn into a positive, but I think she also recognizes that if we left it up to her, nothing would ever get done. So.
Great example, Dennis, of why a team is good to be composed of multiple different behavior styles and preferences, because everybody has a role on the bus, so to speak. Excellent. Let's move on to the next one then, and that's the S style. So S style being you know, very good for a morale amongst the people in the organization. They really bring a balance to people interactions and some key characteristics: good listener, relaxed, team player, steady. They're often thinking about what's the impact on the team if we go forward with some change initiative that's being communicated. So different concerns and worries on their part can be very neutral, can be hard to read if you're communicating with them, to understand how they might be taking that communication. Are they on board with it or not? Slow down, take your time. Karen, your interactions could be with some people that are more S tendencies. They want some assurance to be gone through in more detail. Gives them time to build trust in what's being asked of them. Don't put pressure on them. You know, Mark shared with us his tactic of being comfortable with being silent. Don't put pressure on them to answer and move forward, but maybe it's good to be content and go a little slower. I've also heard comments about bringing down the volume of the communication with an S. So it's less intimidating, more accommodating to them. Those are some of the characteristics of an S style. As you saw, there's quite a good percentage of the population that this is their predominant style. The organization being collaborative, supportive, and perhaps slower to change, being more interested in the people impacts on things. So looking at this type of style, how might this style be perceived negatively by others? If someone has a strong preponderance to this S style of behavior, what might be perceived negatively about their role in the organization?
Maybe unengaged or not decisive.
Mm-hmm.
Just because they take longer to make that decision doesn't mean they require more thought. My husband's like that. He thinks, so I have to ask him questions and I have to really wait a long time.
Yeah, and if you're trying to get things resolved, and that's his personality style, you can see the value of adjusting your style for that type of communication. It's probably much more satisfying.
Kristen brings up a really good point. I like what she said, because when you deal with the steady state folks, right? They're resistant to change. You got to work them through it. But I love what Kristen said. You got to ask more questions. You got to extract that from them. Otherwise, they come across as, aloof. They're not interested, like Kristen said, unengaged. But I like her approach. If you ask more questions and solicit that, they typically have some great information to share, but you got to get it out of them.
Right. They're going to be more reserved, unsure of whether or not they really want to see things change.
That's right.
Yeah. Excellent contribution. That's
sorry, I was just going to interject. Like behavioral style S, they also might be perceived as having different kind of motives. Like it might not be like the motives you think, or it might be a little cautious or worry, or like a past history with everybody. And to be honest, it's an interesting style. I mean, it could be a good thing for gambling or any kind of business venture.
There's certainly tremendous value to those that provide some moderating influence, and that steadiness influence in the organization. Absolutely tremendous value to moderating the pace of change, making sure things are thought through. You can see the dynamic that David's pointing out between the D person maybe making a quick decision, but not thinking it all through. But if you've got a team that also has an S style and personality, may ask more questions. Before they actually move forward, and tremendous value. I agree, David.
And Bill, I like your point also. S is also called the glue of the team. They're a good liaison between the high energy ones and those that don't get anything done. They're kind of I like what Bill said, moderator is a good way to say it, the glue of the team. So that's a powerful aspect to have those kind of people on your team.
Mm-hmm. Anybody have any other, thoughts about how you may view that, how it may be viewed negatively if taken to an extreme, or what are your, what are your tactics to help move that person off of that type of moderating position?
I think Kristen answered that earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. More questions goes a long way.
Yeah, but then the downside though too is if there are ones that take their time to think over things, and we throw kind of like what Karen was saying earlier, we throw too many questions at them, then it kind of like gets them into overwhelm. So, I don't know, sometimes that could be a bad thing to keep throwing questions at them, because then now we've got so many more things, like you give people 3 questions, like Karen had said, and then they're like, well, what's more important? What do we do? And now they've got to think longer because now they've got more things to think about.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. Let's move on to our next style. And the last style is the style of C, the compliance personality. And a lower, percent of the population, and can be much more sticklers, much more specific. They really want to know the why behind what's being done, what decision is being made. Very interested in perfection, set very high standards, analytical. Some may say these types of folks, you may find them in accounting auditing types of roles, or government regulator, FDA types of compliance roles. People that are in Cortland, you're probably very familiar with those type of personalities in the medical field. So very, very specific, systematic, maybe a very black and white. Identifiers follow the rules, very reserved often. Working and interacting, communicating with folks like that, it's very important to give a lot of detail, prove the information, prove why you're proposing something. You have to give them time to process and analyze that. Probably give them lots of time to dig into your detail of why you're concluding that, and maybe look through the supporting pieces of information. Have to be patient with them. Similarly, they want to understand the roots of the decision and not be quick to jump on the bus and go. had to be a little careful too, not to get off into situations of trying to socialize or warm them up too much or be too personable. That's not a way that they are going to connect with you. So you have to be careful about those kind of scenarios. So who might be able to share some experiences with us that you've had with people that are strong C personalities and styles, and how you work to have them convinced of something or communicate something with them?
That's Cortland's PhD chemist, right, Cortland?
It's every engineer I've ever known. I mean, every engineer I've ever known. And I'm sitting here going, small part of the society. Oh, okay, I'm lost.
Well, everybody has all these tendencies, but the dominant one being C is a smaller percentage. But I'm curious, Cortland, of your tactics and strategies, and how do you work with a lot of engineers, a lot of regulatory types of folks. What tactics and methods do you find are successful for you?
It goes right back to what you just said, providing sufficient details, giving them time to grasp the information so that they can touch it, feel it, and explore it. And once you do that and you give them the time, life is great. Unfortunately, there are deadlines, and those deadlines are what kill us all, because an engineer can't do anything quickly. And I'm sure Troy has been there many, many times, that you can't move them fast enough. And, you know, all scientists, I guess, are in that mode.
Yeah, so I'm a D, so I don't, rules are like guidelines to me. And the majority of my family are C, to where every rule has to be followed. So there's a constant like, Dad, what the hell are you doing? I'm like, just come on. They want to know who's on the bus, where are we going, what's the map, or will there be drinks involved? I'm like, driving, let's go, and so, yeah, it's a constant back and forth.
So anybody have experience with engineers? How do you move that engineer from it's 95% perfect? How do you help them to not have perfection be the enemy of progress?
You move them into tasks that aren't life-threatening or critical. You teach them those basics. That's one of the problems what we work with, is that DISC is a fantastic enabler, but it's a static system. We need to teach and create dynamic in a world that's such a moving piece, and that to Cortland's people, that if engineers, the way they're thought, are teamed and partnered in different dynamics and different job sets that are not just single laned, they learn the different traits to pull from the 4 categories to make them better employees and better people.
That's excellent. So you can develop that in some of your people by how you select their assignments. What's the scope of activities that they're given exposure to? So a great way for them I love that, a way of them internalizing the balance between the different styles and tendencies. And it does bring up an excellent point too, is you may think back in your own work career and your work roles and realize you wear different hats, and sometimes that evolves over time based on what your role is in the organization, of being predominantly a D or predominantly an I or an S or a C, partly based on what your role is and what the expectations are of what you need to do to be successful. So does anybody have some thoughts on that? Do you perceive that you have changed over your life, or you've seen people change their behavior based on what their task is or what their role is?
So I'm a high C, and it fits what I do. I'm dealing with numbers all day long, and it really fits my personality. But I've had to learn to, sometimes I have to be a D with some clients, and others I have, I just have to adjust my communication with the different clients, and to get what I need to get, like the information I need to do what I need to do my job that they're hiring me to do. I need to adjust my communication skills with them to either to stress the importance of, hey, we need to have this done by this date. We can't push this off for another 2 months, that type of thing. But it's a matter of different ways of communication and figuring out what works with that individual person. Because I deal with over 100 clients and they're all different and they all react differently.
Yeah. So you use these types of behavior assessments and adjusting on a regular basis. And that's key, that you're able to recognize that. Well done. Troy.
One thing I was going to mention, Bill, is that having spent 20 plus years traveling the globe, right, across cultures, and I'm a high I, so man, I'm just, let's rock and roll, let's go. And then people would just shut down in various cultures. And I thought, what is the deal? Why can't they get it? And I started learning very quickly. Unfortunately, it took me a while to iterate. Every culture, every country different, right? But what I learned is a key phrase of mirror and match. Mirror and match the tone, the volume, the speed at which I was speaking. If I learned to mirror and match, I could function in any of these cultures all over the world. But it took me a while, unfortunately, to figure that out. But had I known more of the disc back then, I'd have been dangerous. But I did learn mirror and matching can really dial in to your various, folks that you're communicating with, whether they be your direct reports, colleagues, peers, whatever. Mirror and matching that is such a simple phrase, but it's so powerful.
Yeah, that's very good. Very good. In the interest of time, I'm going to move forward. Just give one more example to those that are not familiar. Let's just have a little fun with this. So these are different phrases. Say people around the office are getting ready to go to lunch. What would be, you think, the dominant personality of someone that says, I'm going to lunch, are you in? Anybody want to guess?
Probably B.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably a D. Is the personality is quick to make decision and let's go. Let's go for a lunch together. It'll be a blast.
That's an I.
That's the I.
Yeah, that's the high I. Excitement, energy, it's going to be fun. The third one is, anyone else want to go to lunch at 11:45 so we can get that table near the fireplace?
That's probably the C.
That one could be the S or the C. Sociable, get everybody to go. It's going to be warm and cozy. And one more. Actually, I fell off my screen. Okay, this is the longer one.
Oh.
Who wants to go to lunch today at 11:40? Because it's supposed to be nice. The weatherman said it'll be 75, no wind, and that way we can get one of the best 3 tables out on the patio.
That's embarrassing.
That's Cortland's staff.
that might be a C. So, but just so
I'm not that bad.
You forgot to add the seconds to the time.
and the end time too, probably. That's very good. I think it's a great discussion. I hope everybody found some insights of recognizing some of your own communication styles and tendencies, and also had the opportunity to think about how that may impact others, or how you may adjust your communication and communicating with others. Similarly with your own family and friends. I find this useful myself, since I learned more about it, to help adjust my communication with family and friends as well, to connect even better with them. And also to make new friends easier, business acquaintances, colleagues, etc. So I hope you all have some good takeaways from that. Does anybody want to share any key insights or takeaways you have in your environment, your personality and behavior style?
I guess the only other point that I'd add, which has been important for me, is these things adapt. So if you knew me years and years ago when I first started my military career, I was like off the charts D. Now, that was me. And then over time, through a series of mistakes, a series of overstepping and feedback, I learned to tune it down, tone it down, tune it back, and eventually landed where I am today, which is high C. And so it is adaptive, and you can learn and you can adapt and you can adjust. So you're not locked into these things, right?
Mm-hmm. I've found very similar with me as well. I've evolved over time, and I will say my observation, many people have two strong traits. So there might be one strong one, but there's also another one that's very, very strong. And when you have self-reflection, like I'm very high D and very high I. And so there's many situations where I find the D tendency coming out and I have to kind of rein that in some. And other times the I tendency overwhelming in different situations. And so that helps to be aware of what I would say your top two tendencies. And it's more evolved, but also if you're very low in an I or C or one of those characteristics, that can indicate different tendencies and preferences also. Like I think Sean had said he's very, very low C, which means he takes rules as optional, just suggestions. So you can be aware of those low tendencies also and what that might mean as further opportunity to learn about yourself. Well, very good. I hope everyone found this helpful and interesting and insightful for your lunchtime. And I encourage everybody to continue to evolve and grow and recognize how your behavior and styles can influence others and enhance your communication to a higher percentage of the population and the people that you're trying to communicate well with. I'll turn it back over to Dennis in case you have any kind of closing announcements or further communications.
Thank you, Bill. Excellent. I think this topic, it's universal, right? It doesn't matter. It's useful in life and in business, and no matter what phase of business you're in or no matter what phase of life you're in, communication is kind of universal and it never gets old. You're going to be communicating for your entire life and your entire business. So thank you, Bill, for bringing this to us this morning or this afternoon, or I guess it's midday, so I'm not sure if it's afternoon, but either way, at this time slot. So with 5 minutes left, any parting comments that anyone has that they want to add to the topic, or a question that anyone has about DISC, behavior styles, personality traits that you want to throw in before we wrap this one up?
I'm just going to say goodbye. It's been a great session. Thank you, Bill. And I'm just going to have to shoot so I could get to the next meeting.
Thanks, Eddie.
Thanks, Eddie.
All right.
Quick question. Has anybody used DISC with the Gallup poll? And has anybody seen a correlation between the two? The Gallup Strengths Finder.
Strengths. There's definitely links. I don't know that I've used the Strengths Finder book. There's great examples in there that kind of call out and maybe amplify, like in a debrief. You can use some of those examples that are in Strength Finder as an amplifier of the point that you're trying to make. Because a lot of times, especially when you're in the midst of your own debrief or you're in the midst of your own scenarios, it's hard to see through that. But bringing in some of those examples from Strength Finder as an external kind of role play or an external story, it helps to connect the dots. So it is powerful, whether it's Strength Finder or some other external example or story. I think those are pretty powerful to help reinforce the point, because we don't necessarily, read the document, or we hear somebody talking about being a C and it's introverted, and until you call out some of those examples and depersonalize it, sometimes people just don't see through it. I don't know if anyone else has input on that. Okay. All right. Well, I think Trisha would be proud that we started on time, and I have accepted the role of getting us out of here on time. In fact, I'm going to overachieve and I'm going to rub it into her nose that it's 12:57, and I will. I am asking any motions to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All right. Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Adjourned. We call it at 12:57. Call me an overachiever. I can't wait. till
Awesome. Great job, Bill.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
Bill.
Everybody had a